Thank you. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Jim, for that kind introduction. The Tri-Cities area is blessed to have this extraordinary patriot, this amazingly gifted commander and leader live among you. I count the friendship and comradeship of Jim Mattis is one of my great blessings in life, even if his introduction was still a little bit long and somewhat exaggerated. And thank you all for coming out for this occasion. It's always a pleasure to be among Scouting's most loyal and generous supporters. To everyone here, thank you for your contributions in time, passion, and resources in support of the national treasure, and I would argue the national strategic asset that is the Boy Scouts of America. Let me briefly share a personal perspective on why I believe Scouting is so important. I've worked for 8 presidents of the United States. I've traveled the world and worked with many historic figures and more than a few international thugs along the way, including Mr. Putin. I've led 4 very large, very different organizations, including the Scouts. But the only management and leadership training I ever had was in the Boy Scouts. In high school, I wasn't a straight A student, although in my defense, I would say I think A's were a little harder to come by in those days. Nor was I very good at sports. Although I was active in high school activities, I really wasn't a leader in the conventional sense of student government and the like. When I went to, and that was all true in college as well, when I went to Washington, D.C. to begin working for the Central Intelligence Agency 56 years ago, at age 22, I could fit everything I owned into the back seat of my car. I had no connections, and I didn't know a soul. In fact, the only thing I had done in my life to that point that led me to think I could make a difference, that I could be a leader, was to earn my Eagle Scout badge. It was the only thing I had done that distinguished me from so many other high school kids. Earning my Eagle gave me the self-confidence to believe for the first time in my life that I could achieve whatever I set my mind to, that I could be a leader. And it is leadership that I've been asked to talk with you about this morning. Shelves in bookstores are stacked high, and the internet is rife with books on leadership and managing. Countless companies offer countless educational programs on the subject, as do most universities. Yet real leadership is a rare commodity, and we need it now more than ever. Leadership is much more than just managing well. As important as managing is, my dictionary defines a leader as one who acts as a guide, one who shows the way. Accordingly, leadership is by definition about guiding organizations and people into a better future, often leading them where they don't want to go. And because every organization must change in order to survive and to have a future, leadership is fundamentally about leading change. Too many leaders start down the path of change without knowing where they're headed, getting an accurate diagnosis of what is wrong or what is lacking, which is essential to an agenda for change, a vision, if you will. From his or her first day, a new leader's most effective approach to determining both the diagnosis and the proper cure is to listen, and then to integrate what you learn from listening with your own instincts and judgment to devise the path forward. The important thing is to remember that in any public or private sector organization, whether it has 3 million employees, as the Department of Defense, or 3, having a clearly defined, achievable vision, a set of goals, is the precondition for successfully leading change. After all, as Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you will end up somewhere else. A critical component of transformational strategy is winning the support of those in the trenches who deliver the mission of the organization. Recognition of their role and demonstrating respect for them go a long way, and any fool can, and all too many do, try to implement change from the top. Fundamental to enduring success through it is inclusiveness, getting as many people in the organization involved as possible. Another key to leading successful transformation is demanding and demonstrating transparency and sharing of information. People in all organizations are suspicious of change and always suspect hidden agendas. Too many leaders consider the monopoly of information as a source of power. Usually it's just the sign of a weak, insecure leader or an arrogant know-it-all. Whichever it is, it imperils successful implementation of lasting change. Further, contrary to what most bureaucrats in business, government, and universities believe, a good process is not an end in itself. Outcomes are the only things that really matter. A final thought on leading transformational change. People, not systems, implement change. As the leader pursues such an agenda, he or she cannot overlook the fact that the attitudes and commitment of their employees, their subordinates, will determine success or failure. A leader must provide his or her people with the tools and opportunities for professional success and satisfaction. He or she must empower them and provide them with respect, motivation, job satisfaction, upward mobility, personal dignity, and finally, the confidence that as leader, he or she genuinely cares about them collectively and as individuals. You can be the toughest, most demanding leader on the planet and still treat people with respect and dignity. Finally, a few words about the most critical factor in leadership, the leader himself. How does a true leader conduct himself or herself? First, the best leaders have their egos under control. They empower subordinates who are given the lion's share of credit and accolades when success comes. A leader's primary goal should be to get the job done, not personal glorification or self-satisfaction. The environment created by an egoist is the antithesis of what is required to lead successfully. Second, a leader, whether in the public or private sector, must have integrity. If one seeks to lead men and women, you must persuade them to follow you. That means they must trust you. A leader's actions must match his words. Integrity in action is moral authority, and it is moral authority that moves people to follow someone even at personal risk and sacrifice. Third, self-discipline is central to the leadership of institutions and to reforming them. Being an effective leader, especially a reform leader, requires a lot of self-control. Silence and restraint are essential, if undervalued, tools of leadership. I have a sign in my office that says, "Never miss a good chance to shut up." Temper tantrums, desk pounding, and yelling by a leader are an embarrassment and a waste of time and energy. The daughter of the U.S. Chief of Naval Operations in World War II, Admiral Ernest King, described him as the most even-tempered man she knew. He's always in a rage. Fourth, courage is not a word that automatically pops into mind when thinking about organizations. But any time a mid-level leader tells her boss and her colleagues that the old way of doing business was no longer adequate and that change is necessary, it is a courageous act. Even when the man or woman in charge takes a stand that most people, at least initially, oppose, it requires courage. Fifth, and finally, another key aspect of successfully reforming institutions, public or private, is taking the work seriously, but not yourself. Never underestimate the extraordinary power of humor. Of the 8 presidents I worked for, 2 had no discernible sense of humor. Richard Nixon and Jimmy Carter. I'll let you draw your own conclusions from that. The one with the best sense of humor, will not surprise you, was Ronald Reagan. I was briefing him one time in the Oval Office before his first meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev. And Reagan had hearing aids in both ears. And I was seated next to him on a couch, and he was seated in a wingback chair to my right. And in the middle of my briefing, I heard this screeching sound. And he kind of winced, and it was one of his hearing aids. And he reached up and adjusted it. And I went on with my briefing, and a couple of minutes later, it was even loud. It came on and screeched louder, and he really winced in pain. And finally, he reached up and plucked the hearing aid out of his ear, and he pounded it in his hand. And as he was putting it back in his ear, he leaned over and whispered to me, "It's my KGB handler trying to reach me." One time, somebody made a mistake in the Situation Room, and as often was the case, Reagan would tell a story to break to sort of break the tension. His favorite story was about a business leader who had a friend who was opening a new branch office, and so he ordered a flower display to be delivered to the friend in his new branch office. And his friend called him the next day to thank him for the bouquet, but he said, "You know, the thing is that the card on the flower arrangement said, 'Rest in peace.'" And the businessman was very unhappy, and he called the florist and demanded an explanation. And finally, the florist said, "Well, sir, just think of it this way. Somewhere in this city yesterday, somebody was buried under a floral arrangement where the card read, 'Good luck in your new location.'" Dwight D. Eisenhower wrote to his son in 1943, "The one quality that can be developed by studious reflection and practice is leadership. The idea is to get people working together because they instinctively want to do it for you. Essentially, you must be devoted to duty, sincere, fair, and cheerful." Devotion to duty, sincerity, fairness, good cheer. These are not qualities taught in school. Formal education can make a good manager, but it can't make a leader, because leadership is more about the heart than the head. How does any organization teach courage, integrity, a love of people, a sense of humor, the ability to dream of a better future? How can any training program inculcate personal character and honor? Core to leadership is the ability to relate to people, to empathize, understand, inspire, and motivate. If you fundamentally don't like or respect most people, or if you think you're superior to others, chances are you won't be much of a leader, at least in a democracy like ours. Just because you're high on the organizational table and can tell people what to do doesn't make you a leader, just a boss. President Harry Truman once said, "Every great achievement is the story of a flaming heart." Effective leadership is difficult. A leader's heart must be on fire with the belief in what he or she seeks to do. Leading change is a battle and must be undertaken with courage and strength and conviction. The leader must believe in it before he or she can persuade others to believe in it. The leader must be prepared to put his or her job on the line if asking others to risk their careers and reputations to help. The personal qualities of successful leaders I have described just happen to be the foundation stones of the Boy Scouts of America. Qualities and values succinctly captured by the Scout Oath and Law. It is why, after 112 years, Scouting remains the most successful program in America for developing skilled leaders of character and integrity. Our country needs such leaders now more than ever. With your help, Scouting will continue to provide those leaders. I believe that with all my heart. Thank you.